Alrighty, welcome back to another segment of Michael's story. Where we left off is he is now a nurse in San Francisco or SF, and this is pre-pandemic. So now we're starting ramping up to the pandemic. So how's work changed? What's going on with all these new stipulations that are placed on you? Uh, how's this affecting your life as an ICU nurse?
Well, at first, we like just came home from visiting my family in Wyoming, well, our family, and we were just hearing about it because it was like end of February, beginning of March, and I'm like, oh, this isn't going to be too bad. It's just going to be like the avian flu or like the swine flu, where it's like localized in one big country, and then it's not going to, and like maybe it'll go to other places, but it won't be worldwide. So I was kind of discounting it at first, to be really honest.
So,
And then I was talking to more people, being in the medical community. I was like, oh boy, it's coming, and we're gonna have to change our lives for a while, And it was it was a double edged sword being a nurse. Like I was happy I still had my job, but also it was like I get to work in the middle of it now. I get to walk into work and hopefully my mask protects me because I never, you would wear the N95 if you thought someone possibly had tuberculosis or some other crazy airborne diseases, but you never really thought about it,
Yeah.
because you're like, oh yeah, sure. But I'll never forget the first time I walked into a COVID patient's room and I was like, had the masks on, gowned up head to toe. I was like, hopefully this protects me, and it does, thankfully. And they have the rooms set up too where they have the big filters. So what they did on our unit is they pretty much converted it to a COVID unit, and every room had a big HEPA filter that was like gigantic, and it was like making that noise the whole time you're in the patient's room, and it would filter it out. So I worked between two ICUs, that the medical ICU and a surgical ICU, and the medical ICU took the COVID patients first, and we had 16 beds, and I think it was full at times. And then in the surgical unit, we put them up there too sometimes. So that's what changed the workflow. Like at first, we had a lot of help. We had a lot of crisis travelers that would take these big contracts and come in and get paid really well, and we were preparing for the surge, for the first surge, and then it never really came so bad to San Francisco. I mean, well, to where I worked. Um, because of I don't really know why, but I mean, we eventually started getting COVID patients pretty regularly, but it wasn't like overwhelming. It didn't feel at first. We still had safe ratios. Uh, the doctors were really great. I'll never forget the ICU doctors. They were there to protect us, and the attendings were amazing. Like they were like, we're gonna figure this out. Like maybe we should be a little bit more safe here, and they were, oh, and it was crazy to be there at a big hospital to watch them like try and figure it out. It was weird. Like I have the utmost respect for those ICU doctors and our management. Our management did the best they could with what they had. They were.
I think that's a thing that's underlooked is how the medical field in general had to fucking upend their whole protocol and implement this new, basically set up a new ward just to cater to COVID-19 patients. That's crazy, and people don't really. Yeah, okay, fucking places like New York and shit were clapping at the same time every night there for a while to
They
celebrate the
did that in San
nurses.
Francisco. Yeah.
But it's like at the end of the day, like that's cool that they're being appreciated, but what about the mental side of it now? Like, yeah,
Yeah.
you're being appreciated as a nurse and going through shit and seeing hell every day and death, but what's there for you, to help
Yeah.
you.
Yeah. Well, the thing about it was like, yeah, the like I said, the ICU doctors and the management did the best they could, and I really appreciated that. And it, like you said, it upended everything. We sent a group of people to New York to help, from our unit, and they came back and they looked like vets. They were like the way they talked about it, like they saw death. Like in the ICU, in a normal ICU nurse is only supposed to take two patients because they're so sick. You take care of two patients and maybe one patient if they're really sick. There in New York, They were taking care of 5 or 6 patients at once,
Jesus.
ICU patients, which is like that blows my mind, and that's the closest thing you're going to get to wartime nursing, I think, without being in a war.
Well,
And
that is a war. That's a fucking biological war that you're fighting. You know, it's something different. Chemical
yeah,
war.
yeah, exactly. And those people were, it was rough for them, coming back. And we had a lot more staff here. Like we were really taken care of as far as like being able to have an adequate amount of staff. But of course, everyone was getting burnt out.
Now, is there any things put in place, policies put in place, so that they can actively fight against this this burnout syndrome that you guys were going through?
I think it's just starting as far as nursing in general. Even before the pandemic, they're starting to realize the importance of like meditation, or the Headspace app gave a year free to nurses, I think it was a medical field. I
That's
didn't take advantage
awesome.
of it until the end, but it was super helpful when I started using it, and I thought that was super cool. No, but I think something like that should be talked about more. For me, that's like one of the biggest things in nursing that I care the most about is nurses are usually amazing at taking care of others. They're so gifted at it, but they always forget about themselves, and they end up trashing themselves. Like there's so many undosed, alcoholics, like anxiety, depressive people that I've met working, or you name it, but they still keep going. They just like grit it and get through it. And it's hard to watch
Well,
because
that's
they're so
you
good
can't you can't
nurses.
you can't white knuckle it through life like that. Like numbing yourself after every shift until you pass out and then wake up and do it all over fucking again. Like
Yeah. And I
what's it?
saw it when I traveled, I saw it everywhere. It's not just here, it's
Yeah,
everywhere. And the pandemic just compounded the problem because we felt very obligated to go to work because we're in a pandemic. So
exactly.
we're the rightly trained nurses in the ICU to take care of these really sick patients. Like they were sick. Like they were, sometimes we'd have to sedate them so much we'd have to paralyze them because so we could gain control of their lungs.
Oh
So the vent
shit.
could breathe for them. So they'd be paralyzed in bed, and the vent would be working. We'd have to figure out the vent settings. Not me. I would help just take care of the patient, but the respiratory therapist and the doctor would figure it out. And then you have the long recovery afterwards. People don't talk about that. After you get unsedated and unparalyzed, you have to learn how to walk again. You have to learn how to eat again. And you are just learning to just do basic to day things. So that's going to take months to re-strengthen your atrophied muscles from being in bed.
Yeah.
So
That's crazy. So you're going through this pandemic. Your days are now darker. The
mhm.
fight against death is harder to push through, and you're seeing your coworkers start having the effect on them mentally, and now you're starting to notice like the kind of like the dark side of the medical field is that these people are willing to risk their lives for everybody else, but don't have enough time or energy after work to take care of themselves.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
that's exactly it.
so now if you were to change something to help people, what would you start doing? What would your
I think
solution be?
I think what you talked about earlier might be a good solution. I never thought about like that, but like entering into nursing school, I think that should be something that should be talked about. Like, hey, you're taking care of this, and you're going to have to take care of yourself in an effective way. Even though it is still a job, I know that, but still, we get to get confronted with mortality at a younger age, and I think that needs to be talked about more. I think there has to be a lot of dialogue without condemnation, because it's seen as very weak. If you're like, it's easy to say burnout. In nursing, you can say burnout, and that's a very vague term, and that's a very like, oh, I'm burnt out, so I called in. Okay, that's okay to say, but if you're like, I'm struggling coming into work, I'm depressed, this I get super bad anxiety. Like I've walked into nurses at work and we've talked about it. Um, but it's not common to talk about because like, oh, you got a problem too, like you got to take care of these people and show up to work, maybe pick up extra shifts too. They guilt you, like you should pick up extra shifts because we're so short staffed, you
Hmm.
know. Like that's the
So,
thing, like I didn't realize when I started in the medical field that there's always short staff. Like everywhere you go, there's always opportunities to pick up more overtime. And there's nurses that pick up overtime like no one's business. You know, her nurses hustle to make
mhm.
money.
Of course, of
So
course.
yeah, yeah, it's very productive based. That's what surprised me the most about the medicine is very like you have to be productive, but we're taking care of people, you
Yeah,
know, at the same
yeah.
time. Like how do we balance that?
Like just like the whole thing with the army and like not being prepared or not having the knowledge to spot out the onset of mental illness, especially at a high rate job like mortality job like yours is like it's just crazy to me because you would think that being in the medical field they'd be like, oh, we got to watch out for our own people because if we don't, we're not going to have anybody do our fucking work. It's like, why don't they offer seminars or uh, teach yoga or teach some kind of mental health or meditation, whatever? Like, I don't understand that.
And I think it was slowly starting. Like I would see like pamphlets for it and stuff like that, and I'm sure there's stuff out there that I don't know about. Like, so I can't be like
Yeah, yeah.
the know all about it. But it just seems like from my experiences that it wasn't very well talked about. And being in San Francisco, they're always like, I think a neat thing about California is they're all about like just in general in the population, that like they're open to talk about spirituality, meditation, all that stuff. So I think that kind of did bleed in a little bit to the
Mhm.
medical field. So I did see that, but I don't think it's a pillar as it should be to take care of yourself. Like even the doctors, like I have a ton of respect for doctors because they come into medical school, they're working 60 to 80-hour weeks, you know, learning about medicine, trying to keep people alive, trying to make the right decisions, and they are getting crushed, you know, and they are just anxious and stuff. And I mean, they do get some support, but I feel like the mental side still is
Well,
lacking. And
well,
to
look at what kind of job that is. Here, you're in charge of this person's life. Do everything you can. But if you fuck up just a little bit and you kill somebody, there's probably a lawsuit waiting to fucking rape you and take all your money away. That's a
which is
scary.
it's
That's
scary.
scary.
It's so scary, and your livelihood's being challenged. You
Yeah,
know.
you're constantly walking on the line. That's all you're
Yeah.
doing. You're just walking the line.
Yeah. And yeah, so the ICU was really hard, and I was getting burnt out. Like I even said, I burnt out. I was anxious, depressed. It was not the place for me. Like there'd be days at home I would be just wake up super anxious. Like I got to go into work today. Like I don't want to deal with the family members because I know they're hurting and it's gonna suck to hear their story and my patient's dying and they're gonna die, but we're gonna keep doing whatever we can to keep them alive because no one's really ever ready to have their loved one leave. No one's ready.
No, no.
So when you kind of try and make a decision of like when should this person leave, it's really hard and it's hard to watch. I hate it. I hate watching it, but I do love helping people die well. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah,
Like
yeah,
when you
no.
could sit there and just be with them and like make them comfortable. For some weird reason, that part of the ICU I didn't really mind. When I knew the goal was that they were going to pass away and I'm going to help them stay comfortable and just take good care of them until that time happened. It was very spiritual and it was very beautiful. But like the whole we're going to keep them alive at all costs because like they think it's not time yet. It's really hard to do that in the ICU because you could do a lot to keep people alive or seem like they're alive. Um, yeah, you could do a lot and you
So
keep people alive a lot longer.
that's a thing that I have great admiration for you is because you and your wife because you guys like you see these movie roles of nurses and stuff and they're the old calloused emotionless person at work that talks about stuff just like nonchalantly, but you and your wife have been able to fight that calloused heart, like your heart becoming callous to these horrible situations and you still absorb them and you
Hmm.
process them and you just don't numb yourself to them. I think that's huge. Like I wouldn't be able to do that on a daily. I know I wouldn't be able to. That's too much sadness. That would get to me some like the way my brain works. If I was in a sad environment like that every day, I'd end up killing myself because I couldn't handle it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you for saying that. But that old cranky nurse was that lovely nurse at one time, like you see that happen, you know, that's the thing is like I feel for that nurse because she was at once idealistic, like I'm going to take really good care of people. That's what it seems like. A lot of these
Yeah.
people that are nurses have this great idea of like, I'm going to go out and have a lot of purpose in my life. Do some
Well,
purpose. That's not a real sentence.
but the thing about that is like it's just like just basic psychology is like all we're training do and learning to do is how to reattach people to their childhood, pretty much bring
Mhm.
that inner child out in people. It's the same concept as your job is like the more that you numb yourself and put these feelings off, the further away you are from that little child. And when that little
Mhm.
child is so far out of sight, you're calloused over and you're numb. You're numb to
Yeah.
fucking life, you know?
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. And it's just like you get you in the military you have the gallows humor. It's the same way in nursing. There's gallows humor
Oh
everywhere.
yeah, the dark humor. Yeah.
Yeah, that's how you
Yeah,
deal with
yeah.
it.
Yeah. It is how you deal with it, but I think it's the wrong way to deal with it, you know?
Yeah.
Talking about dealing with death, something that's been on my mind a lot here lately is I've learned more and more about the Jewish faith and stuff like that, and just the way that they handle death. Like if there's a death in the family, they force you for however long. I've heard 7 days, I've heard 4 days of sitting in a house with no electricity, no nothing. People bring food over to
Mm,
your house and making you tell stories, the good stories of somebody that passed. That is,
that's beautiful.
it's beautiful. It's fucking amazing, and I don't see why that's not adapted into. Well, I know why because people are so stuck to their religion and their ideas, but it's such an amazing tool that I'm gonna implement that into my family because it forces you to deal with your shit. You know,
I think
it's a
that's super cool.
that and the one night a week Shabbat where from
Yeah,
seven
we've
o'clock
talked
at
about
night,
that.
yeah,
Yeah.
24 hours, no electricity, no nothing. That's amazing.
Yep. Yep.
But
That's super cool.
anyways,
Anyways,
sorry.
back to nursing. Yeah, like, I think
Yeah.
that's super cool. I could talk a whole nother podcast about it 'cause it's fantastic.
Well, thanks.
Um, float
Okay,
tanks.
so now in the pandemic, being a nurse in the ICU, intensive care unit, and you're starting to see the country's response to this pandemic, and now to the vaccines of now you're seeing this collective weird conspiracy theory about science start to branch out. Like, how does that affect
Mhm.
you as a nurse, and especially in a COVID unit? You know, like.
Yeah. Well, um, in San Francisco, they've been really good about wearing masks. Like they wear 'em- like if you pass someone in the street, they'll like put a mask on while you pass them. Like being out here has been really nice. As far as I feel very fortunate that like people take it pretty seriously overall out here. And as a nurse, like you're just like just take the vaccines because we are all in this together. And I mean, and people have their reasons. I think at the end of the day, like you can't force people to take a vaccine, and they can make their decision not to. And I respect that, on some level. But for me, it's really hard because it doesn't affect just you not taking the vaccine; it affects others. And when you see what I've seen in the unit, like you'd see families where a person would get COVID and they would go and be sedated and then wake up and find part of their family is gone because they died from COVID too. And I feel like the risks of taking the vaccine aren't as high as getting COVID. Maybe that's what I think, but I'm not a virologist. I'm not an epidemiologist, but for me, that's what it feels like to me. And it's been hard. It's been hard watching people not doing it. And I feel for those nurses in those states because those nurses are getting
Oh yeah.
crushed. Like
Oh yeah.
I I was on paternal leave during this Thanksgiving and Christmas, and I am thankful I wasn't there because even here the COVID numbers spiked. I don't know if it was the worst. I don't know the numbers, but from my unit at least, I heard it was one of the worst COVID spikes out of all of them because people were meeting up together and it was causing a horrible uh, surge in cases. And I was thankful I wouldn't have been there because I probably would have just quit.
Yeah.
So
The thing I kind of want to get into is you being a nurse and having trained in this scientific thought of thinking scientifically and not with emotions, and then you turn on your TV and you hear this one side fighting another side about vaccines and stuff like that. Like, you being of a scientific mind and in the field that you're in, what do you like? How do you think? Because that in general is a mental health problem of our country. Is why do we have to go? Why do we have to tack emotion to get a point across? Why can't we
yeah,
just all be trained in this scientific thinking to where it doesn't matter what you fucking feel, it matters about the goddamn numbers. I don't get it.
And I think that's just America, man. America has so many different ideas across the whole state. I don't know. I don't really have a great answer for that, but um, I don't know. Like it's personal choice. It seems like, and sometimes that involves medical, like that goes back to like me talking about like with family members and their family go, like it's their choice to keep them going or to let them go.
Yeah.
But right now we just see the effects of it because of COVID. Everyone else gets to play a part in it, even though they want to be in it or not.
Yeah.
So I think if it doesn't directly affect you, you don't see it. You don't see
Yeah.
it. So obviously, like I think if I didn't see it or knew someone in it, I think it would be a little bit hard for me to understand because I don't know, I don't see it.
Yeah. So now your child was born and you are going back to work and they stuck you on total shit schedule,
Yeah,
and talk about that.
yeah, because we've had so many like people have changed career paths. I feel like it's the pandemic too. Like everyone make a decision. Like, what am I gonna do for the rest of my life? So a lot of nurses have moved on from the ICU or moved cities. Like that's been a big just United States thing. Everyone's been moving.
Mm.
And so we lost a lot of nurses and since I was hired as a variable nurse, like which I could work nights sometimes, but it was very rare because we had enough staff. And I come back and I'm on night shift and I hate night shift because I'm the annoying morning person that people hate because I just love it so much. And it crushed me. I hated it. And so what I did is applied for jobs in the system until I found a job that worked for me. And it was hard to do, but I was very supported by Katie, and I actually got to see my kid a little bit more than I thought doing overnights. That was nice, even though I was like in the overnight tunnel. But now I work as a post anesthesia care unit nurse. It's called the PACU. We deal with people after surgery, and then we get them to the hospital or we send them home. It's a lot like my first job as a CNA when I was working at the surgery center, except I just take care of them before and after surgery, and it's busy as hell, but it's nice. But I did realize working there that the pandemic affected every nurse. It wasn't just in the COVID because like I was in the ICU in the COVID unit,
Mm.
but it affected everybody as a nurse. Everyone is struggling to be a nurse right now in COVID times. So
Yeah.
it's not just us in the ICU.
So now that you are in this new job, what are the things? Can you feel the pressure in your brain kind of alleviate because of the new schedule that you're on? That you're working days and you're not in this high intense situation anymore.
Oh yeah, I actually like my job, which is weird to say. Like it's nice to talk to patients and stuff. Like sometimes I'm catching myself spending too much time talking to patients because I got to go to surgery. So I'm like, okay, I'll save this story for later. I'm sorry, you got to get going.
That's
So
awesome.
it's kind of fun to get to just talk to people that aren't like anxious and stressed out because they're having a horrible day.
Mm. Now,
So
did you ever have to handle like giving the news to a family, or was that solely doctors that would do that?
doctors give the news, but we're there to deal with the effects, like the cleanup afterwards, if that
Mm.
if that makes sense.
No, the cleanup crew. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the doctors, I can't imagine doing that.
I
That's
don't
a
think I don't think I'd be able to. That's so sad.
It's so sad. And we're there to help support the family, support the medical staff, as best as we can, and carry out the orders that the doctors put for the patient to keep them comfortable and stuff like giving this drug every so often and all
Mm,
that kind of stuff. So
mm.
yeah, that's how it usually goes with end of life care. Yeah.
Yeah, the end of life care thing. I don't think I could do that. Go ahead, Hendrix.
Okay, so with everything that you've been through, that you've told us so far, the infection in India, the dealing with the ex-wife, seeing the deaths of being a nurse, your nurse buddies dying, committing suicide, all this stuff that you've been through, the new marriage, the difficulties in a new marriage, all of that. Then they're seeing the response of America to the COVID-19. Was there ever a time that you, like, what's the lowest point you've been through? Like, how close were you to the line of just giving up?
Um, I think it was when we first came here to San Francisco. That was a really good question. When I first came here to San Francisco, and the height of my like addiction and depression were like meeting each other, like the depression from work and the anxiety from work and the addiction. I think I was really dark. Like I remember sitting in the kitchen, like hiding by myself, like not trying to talk to anybody. Just like I don't know if I could do this anymore. Like this is too much. Like I just can't do it. And that's when we had the talk of you need to go take care of this.
Was
So I
there
think that
anything
was
that you
tough.
relied on?
Like we mean,
Like alcohol, drugs, or depressive, anything?
uh no, not usually. I would always dabble in alcohol and drugs, but it was more emotional for me. I'm not very good at taking drugs. You could ask Addie. Like drugs as far as like marijuana. Like it was, I was never very good at it.
You suck a dick for
But
marijuana?
yeah, um, it was more emotional for me. Like that's where it was for me. Like the emotional problems. Like I would self sabotage. I was always very good at beating myself up. That was always the go to for me.
Huh. Somebody else
Yeah.
has that self-sabotage thing
This
pretty
is not my
heavy.
episode. What's
Yeah. So that's what I would do.
what's the darkest thing you've ever told yourself? Like, I'm not good enough, or I should just give up?
I think it's the consistency. Like you're a piece of shit. You're not good enough. You're not smart enough. You're not. I was my I heard recently in a program meeting them say I'm trying to turn my inner critic into an inner ally, and I always felt like my inner critic was always just kind of like never good enough. So that I mean, which always helped me like in a good way, like in a good and bad way. Like I'd push myself unnecessarily to get through
Mm.
stuff, but sometimes at the end of the day, I would hate myself. Does that help answer your question?
Yeah, that actually answers it in full. So pretty much. See, my inner critic would just be like, "Nah, you get the fuck out of here with that shit. We're not gonna be good today."
Yeah,
Well, I
makes
mean,
sense.
fuck, we all have that inner negative voice. Even like this last week, I think it was Monday or something. Uh, that last Monday that I was just like, I'm just been sleeping all day. I've been eating all day. I mean, that shit'll never go away. I don't care how amazing you are at fucking psychology, but it's yeah,
Hey, see how that couch hasn't been made yet?
yeah,
I spent my past few days up in there.
Yeah.
yeah.
So
Everybody retreats to their safe place some way somehow. With drugs, without drugs, whatever. Music. What is your
yeah.
drug that you use now? Since you are a member of AA and everything like that, what is your go-to crutch now?
Outdoors. I love being outside. Talking to people. I call people consistently, almost to a fault. Some days Katie has to tell me, "Hey, you gotta take a break from calling everyone in your phone book today and talking about life." Because I'm a social person, and that's my biggest. That gives me the juice.
Well,
You
you
know what I
got
mean?
the fucking gift of gab just like Pops does. You can fuck
Yeah,
talk to anybody.
I could just see it. Hey,
yeah.
we haven't spoken in 2 minutes. How you doing?
Exactly. Exactly. And then just spending time with the family. Like I think that's part of it too. I don't know if that's consider like a drug, but like it's fun. Like I don't mind being a homebody,
Yeah.
you know.